The night of the premiere began with a strange kind of silence. People were gathered outside the theater with cameras raised and lights ready, but something felt different. The air was thick with expectation, as if everyone sensed that something meaningful was about to happen. No one spoke loudly. No one laughed. It was the kind of quiet that builds before a storm or before a miracle. For a moment, even the reporters waited without shouting questions. They only watched the dark road ahead, hoping to be the first to see the stars arrive. No one knew that tonight would become a memory people would talk about for years. No one knew that tonight would reveal something about kindness and respect that no flashing camera could ever hide. The black car appeared slowly from the end of the street. At first, people did not react. It seemed like just another vehicle passing by. But then the car stopped exactly in front of the red carpet, and every camera lifted at the same time. The doors stayed closed for a few seconds, long enough to make people whisper and wonder who was inside. The tension grew thicker with every heartbeat. It felt like the whole world leaned forward in curiosity. Then something unexpected happened. Both doors opened at the same moment, like a scene perfectly timed in a movie, and Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock stepped out together. The crowd froze. The lights flashed so quickly that they looked like lightning. People were not prepared for this. They had seen the two actors at events before, but never arriving together in such a calm and united way. Something about their entrance felt warm and gentle, not loud or dramatic. Keanu stood tall, wearing a simple expression of quiet confidence. Sandra took a slow breath, her eyes soft but thoughtful, as if she was searching the crowd for a safe place to rest her gaze. For a moment, they did not move. They simply turned toward each other and exchanged a small smile, the kind of smile that only close friends share when they do not need to explain anything with words. What the world did not know was that Sandra had felt nervous the entire ride. Her hands had been cold. Her voice had been low. The thought of facing so many bright lights and fast questions made her stomach twist. She kept thinking about the past year, the stress, the challenges, the moments she doubted herself. She feared that a single wrong moment, a single wrong angle would bring all of that weight back. Keanu noticed it the moment she stepped into the car earlier that evening. He had seen the tension in her shoulders and the quiet worry in her breath. He did not ask too many questions. He simply said, in the softest way, that she could hold his arm if she needed support. Inside the car, she had whispered that she did not want to fall or stumble in front of everyone. Keanu nodded with a gentle smile. He told her he would match her pace and stay beside her no matter how slow or fast she wanted to walk. It was such a simple promise, but it made her feel grounded again. She rested her hand lightly on his arm while they waited inside the car for their cue to step out. The silence between them was comforting. It felt like a reminder that she did not have to face the world alone. That was the real reason she walked out calm and steady. That was the reason she breathed without fear when the lights hit her face. But something changed the moment they began walking down the red carpet. Sandra's smile tightened. She looked away for a brief second, and Keanu felt her hand shift slightly. He followed her eyes and saw the corner she was avoiding. A small group of reporters stood there with microphones lowered and eyes sharp with intention. Keanu understood instantly. He had seen those expressions before. Those were not the faces of people who came to celebrate. Those were the faces of people who came to dig, to pull, to stir old stories that Sandra wished would stay in the past. The kind that could ruin a peaceful night and turn a celebration into something painful. Keanu slowed down without making it obvious. He gently guided her to his left side and shifted his body just slightly ahead of hers. The movement was subtle but strong enough to protect her from the angle that the group was aiming for. He did not push. He did not pull. He simply created a shield with his presence. To anyone watching, it looked like a natural adjustment in their pace. But to Sandra, it felt like a quiet rescue in the middle of a storm she thought she had to face alone. She breathed out softly, and Keanu heard it. He did not look at her directly, but she felt the silent message in his calm steps. She was safe. The crowd began to notice the shift. Cameras that were ready to capture something uncomfortable quickly changed their focus. They saw Keanu protecting Sandra without drawing attention to himself. They saw respect in every small gesture. They saw friendship that did not need to be loud to be powerful. Fans started cheering louder, but the tone of the cheers changed. It became warm instead of wild. It became supportive instead of chaotic. The pressure that had been building around them slowly melted into a gentle excitement, and Sandra finally relaxed her grip. She whispered a quiet thank you, and Keanu answered with a soft smile she had seen many times before in difficult situations. The night felt different after that moment. It felt like someone had opened a window in a room full of heat. It felt like relief mixed with gratitude. The cameras kept flashing, but the mood shifted from tension to celebration. Sandra lifted her head again, her confidence returning. Keanu walked beside her with a steady rhythm, matching her steps like a silent promise. The premiere lights reflected softly on their faces, making the moment feel almost unreal. Many people around them sensed the atmosphere change, but they did not know why. Only Keanu and Sandra understood the small storm they had just walked through together. As they reached the main entrance of the theater, Sandra paused for half a second. She looked back at the path they had walked. The lights, the people, the whispers. She realized she had not thought of them with fear anymore. She realized that the moment she stepped out of the car, she had been walking with courage she thought she had lost. Keanu noticed her pause. He asked if she was all right. She nodded gently. She said she was better than she expected. He gave her a warm look that told her he believed her, even if she still doubted herself. The doors opened in front of them and soft music flowed out. The warm glow of the theater light touched their faces. For a moment, the world outside disappeared. The photographers stayed quiet. The crowd waited. The night had only just begun, but something important had already happened. Something that would shape the rest of the evening in ways neither of them could predict. The premiere had lit up, not because of the cameras, but because of a friendship that stood strong in the middle of pressure and silence. The theater doors closed behind them, and for a moment the noise of the crowd faded into a distant echo. Soft music floated through the entrance hall, mixing with warm golden lights that reflected off the tall glass walls. The air inside felt calmer, almost peaceful, as if the world outside was miles away. Sandra let out a slow breath she had been holding for too long. Her heartbeat began to settle, and her shoulders dropped from the tension she carried through the carpet. Keanu noticed this immediately. He walked beside her with the same gentle pace, giving her space, but also making sure she knew he was close. As they moved deeper into the hall, staff members and attendees turned their heads. Some smiled with genuine joy. Some whispered among themselves, not with gossip, but with a quiet kind of admiration. It was rare to see two actors arrive together with such warmth and comfort. Most premieres were full of noise and excitement, but this moment carried something softer. People could feel it even without knowing the full story. Sandra felt her cheeks warm as she passed by familiar faces. She kept her smile steady, but her mind replayed the moment on the carpet. The uncomfortable corner, the sharp eyes, the whispering group. She wondered if they would still try to approach her inside. Keanu sensed her thoughts before she said anything. He did not need words. He had known her long enough to recognize when her silence carried more weight than her voice. He slightly leaned closer and asked in a low tone if she wanted a moment to breathe before the interviews. She nodded slowly. Her voice was quiet when she replied that she just needed a few minutes to clear her head. He gently pointed toward a small side lounge that overlooked the city through tall windows. The space was empty and far away from the main crowd. Sandra agreed, and they walked toward it together. Once they entered the lounge, Sandra walked up to the window and looked out at the glittering city lights below. The view stretched far into the night, glowing with calm energy. She placed her hand lightly on the glass. The cool surface helped her settle into herself. Keanu stood a few steps behind her, giving her quiet space. He did not rush her. He did not ask questions. He simply waited. He knew that sometimes the strongest support was simply staying close without forcing conversation. After a long moment, Sandra turned around. Her voice was soft but steady. She thanked him for helping her outside. She said she had not expected to feel so overwhelmed by the crowd. Keanu nodded with a small smile. He told her that it was normal to feel pressure, especially when people were watching and waiting with 100 questions hidden behind their cameras. He reminded her that she did not have to face any moment alone, not tonight, and not ever when he was around. His words were simple, but they carried warmth that settled deep inside her chest. But then something unexpected happened. A quiet knock sounded at the door. Both of them looked up. For a second, Sandra feared it might be one of the reporters who had slipped inside. She felt her pulse rise again. Keanu stepped forward quickly, placing himself slightly in front of her as he opened the door. To their relief, it was not a reporter. It was a young staff member holding a small envelope with shaking hands. The girl looked nervous, as if she had been sent on a fragile mission. She said that someone outside had insisted she deliver the envelope directly to Sandra. Her voice showed she did not want to disturb them, but she had been told it was important. Keanu took the envelope gently and thanked her. The girl nodded and stepped away quickly, leaving the door half open before disappearing down the hallway. Keanu closed the door and looked at the envelope in his hand. There was no name written on it, no clue about who sent it. Only a small mark in the corner, like a faint symbol made with quick ink. Sandra felt her stomach tighten again. She wondered if this was connected to the uncomfortable group outside. She wondered if someone was trying to provoke her or remind her of something she wanted to forget. Her hands felt cold again as she reached for the envelope. Keanu stopped her gently. He told her he would open it first just to make sure it was safe. Sandra hesitated but nodded. She trusted him completely. She knew Keanu was not the kind of person who acted out of fear. He acted out of care. He opened the envelope slowly and pulled out a small folded paper. It was handwritten, the ink slightly smudged as if someone wrote it in a hurry. Keanu read the first line and his expression softened. He handed the note to Sandra. Her heart beat faster as she unfolded it. The writing was delicate, almost shaky. The message was short but emotional. It said that someone in the crowd had seen her kindness years ago when she comforted a young fan who was crying at an event. The fan, now grown, was in the crowd tonight and wanted to finally thank her. The message said that Sandra's kindness had changed their life in ways she never knew. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She pressed the note gently against her chest. She remembered that moment. She remembered the small girl with shaking hands who was overwhelmed by the crowd. She remembered kneeling down and whispering calm words to help her breathe again. She had not thought about that moment in years. She never expected that it had stayed in someone's heart for so long. The note ended with a line saying the fan did not want to disturb her night, but wanted her to know that one small act of kindness can light up a life forever. Sandra wiped her eyes gently. She smiled with a softness that held both surprise and gratitude. She looked at Keanu, who returned a warm expression. He told her that this was the truth of who she was, no matter what rumors or questions people tried to bring up. He said the world remembers kindness more than noise. His voice carried a deep sincerity that settled into her heart. She felt lighter, more grounded than before. The pressure around her slowly faded into something softer. Just as she began to relax, Keanu's phone vibrated with a message. He read it and his expression grew serious but calm. Sandra noticed this instantly. She asked what happened. Keanu said that the uncomfortable group of reporters had moved inside the theater entrance. They were trying to position themselves in a way that would force Sandra into answering questions before the movie started. Sandra felt the pressure return. She knew they would not give up easily. She also knew that walking straight into them would make her anxiety rise again. But Keanu looked at her with a steady gaze. He said they would handle it together. He suggested a different route toward the main hall, one that passed through a side staircase rarely used during events. Sandra agreed with a slow breath. She trusted him. She always had. They stepped out of the lounge, walking quietly down the hallway. The thin carpet softened their steps. The lights dimmed slightly as they moved deeper into the quieter part of the building. The tension grew again, but now it mixed with suspense rather than fear. As they reached the staircase, Sandra heard faint voices echoing from the floor below. Keanu paused for a second, listening carefully. He recognized the voices. The reporters were closer than expected. They had changed positions again, trying to catch her by surprise. The plan suddenly became uncertain. Sandra felt her breath stop for a moment, but Keanu placed a steady hand on her back and whispered for her to follow his lead. His tone was calm, confident, and grounding. They continued down the staircase, step by step, not knowing what waited around the corner. The night was shifting again. The suspense was growing stronger. Sandra held her breath, trusting Keanu fully as they moved toward the main hall with caution and quiet determination. The staircase felt colder than the rest of the building, as if the lights above could not reach the corners where shadows gathered. Sandra followed Keanu closely, her hand brushing the railing while her steps stayed soft and careful. The voices of the reporters echoed faintly from below, bouncing off the walls in uneven patterns. Sometimes the tone sounded sharp, sometimes uncertain. She could not make out the words, but she sensed the intention behind them. It was the same tension she had felt outside, the same pressure hiding behind curious eyes and quick whispers. Keanu stopped halfway down the stairs and looked over the edge. The lower landing was empty, but the hallway connected to it was glowing with bright white lights. Shadows moved across the floor. Reporters stood only a few steps away from where they needed to pass. Sandra felt her heart tighten again. The plan to avoid them was falling apart faster than they expected. She wondered if they should go back. She wondered if they should wait. But Keanu took a slow breath and told her they still had a chance. He said they would walk calmly, without hesitation, as if they belonged exactly where they were. Sandra trusted his instinct. She nodded softly, steadying her breath. They took the last step slowly. The bright lights hit them when they reached the bottom. Sandra blinked as her eyes adjusted. Keanu walked slightly ahead, acting as a shield without making it obvious. Their steps were steady and controlled. For a moment, it seemed like the plan might work. The reporters did not notice them right away. They were busy checking their equipment and whispering among themselves. Sandra felt a brief wave of relief. She kept close to Keanu, matching his pace, ready to slip past the corner and move toward the main hall. But before they could turn, a microphone suddenly pointed toward them. One of the reporters spotted Sandra and called out her name with a sharp tone. The sound cut through the quiet hallway like a blade. The other reporters turned instantly, their eyes widening with sudden excitement. They rushed toward her in a cluster, questions spilling out in overlapping waves. Sandra's heart jumped. She had imagined this moment in her mind many times, but being trapped in it felt heavier than she expected. Keanu reacted before she had to face any of the questions. He raised his hand in a calm but firm gesture, signaling the group to slow down. The gesture was soft enough to remain respectful but strong enough to create space between Sandra and the crowd. Some reporters paused. Others continued speaking, trying to push for a reaction. They wanted her to comment on rumors. They wanted her to address old stories. They wanted something they could twist into headlines. Sandra felt the pressure build, the same pressure that had followed her outside. Keanu stepped forward slightly, placing himself between Sandra and the growing cluster of microphones. He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. He simply spoke with quiet clarity. He said that Sandra was here to celebrate the film, not to revisit stories that did not belong to the night. He asked them to show respect, reminding them that kindness costs nothing. His tone was steady, but there was a weight behind his words that made the hallway still for a moment. Some reporters lowered their cameras. Others exchanged uncertain glances. They were not expecting Keanu to intervene this calmly. Sandra felt a soft warmth spread inside her chest. She did not need to speak. She did not need to defend herself. Keanu's presence did it for her in a way that did not escalate anything. He protected her without confrontation, only through calm strength. However, one reporter was not satisfied. He stepped to the front, determined to break through the calm barrier that Keanu had created. He spoke directly to Sandra, his voice loud enough to echo through the hallway. He asked a question about a rumor that had troubled her for years, a question she had tried to outrun more times than she could count. Her breath stopped. Her eyes lowered. She felt the old fear pushing back into her chest. The room felt smaller. Her fingers trembled slightly at her side. Before the reporter could ask a second question, Keanu's expression changed. He did not look angry, but there was a firmness in his eyes that silenced the room. He said the question was inappropriate and unfair. He said Sandra deserved respect, especially tonight. He did not raise his voice, but the softness in his tone carried a strength that felt unbreakable. The reporter lowered his microphone, realizing he had gone too far. A quiet tension settled over the group. No one dared to push any further. Sandra looked up at Keanu with gratitude that she could not express in words. He turned slightly toward her and gave a small, reassuring nod. It told her she was not alone. It told her she never had to face moments like this without support. It told her that he would always stand between her and anything that tried to hurt her. They began walking again. This time the reporters stepped aside, creating a path for them. No one called out her name. No one reached for another question. The silence was almost surprising, but it carried a sense of respect that had not been there before. Sandra's heartbeat finally began to slow. She focused on the sound of her steps and the calm presence beside her. As they neared the entrance to the main hall, Sandra whispered a quiet thank you. Keanu smiled softly and said he only did what anyone should do for a friend. She felt the words settle gently inside her. Friendship with him had always been steady and quiet, not loud or dramatic. It was made of small actions, shared trust, and silent understanding. Moments like this reminded her how rare that kind of bond truly was. They stepped into the main hall, where hundreds of guests were already seated. The lights were soft and welcoming. Staff members guided them toward their seats near the front row. As they walked down the aisle, Sandra felt the pressure of the hallway melt away. She looked at Keanu and saw the same calm kindness she had depended on through the entire night. But before they could take their seats, a familiar face stood up from the front row. Sandra stopped in surprise. She had not expected to see this person here. Her eyes widened with recognition, and a new wave of suspense rose inside her. The night was about to take another unexpected turn. Sandra stopped walking the moment she saw the familiar face standing near the front row. Her breath caught in her chest, and her eyes softened with a mixture of surprise and something deeper that even she could not explain. Keanu looked at her, sensing the sudden shift in her steps. He followed her gaze and saw the person stepping forward with slow, careful movements, almost as if they did not want to disturb the moment unfolding between them. It was a director they had both worked with many years ago, someone who knew them during a time when they were still discovering their place in the film world. He had guided them, encouraged them, and pushed them to see their own strength when they doubted it. Sandra had not seen him in a long time. Neither had Keanu. The director walked toward them with a gentle smile, the kind that carried years of memories inside it. When he stopped in front of them, he placed a hand over his heart and said he was proud to see them arrive together tonight. Sandra felt a sudden warmth rise inside her. The director had always been someone who understood her without asking too many questions. He always noticed the emotions she tried to hide and the pressure she carried quietly. Seeing him here on a night already filled with tension felt like a soft reminder that her journey had meaning beyond rumors and whispers. Keanu greeted him with a respectful nod, and the director returned it with warmth. He looked at both of them and said something neither expected. He said he had been watching them from the back of the room when they entered the hall. He noticed the way Sandra held herself, the way Keanu stayed close to her, and the way they moved as if they were connected by trust that came from years of shared experiences. He said their entrance had changed the energy of the whole room. People who were restless became calm. People who were distracted paid attention. He said that some moments are not loud, but they carry a power that everyone can feel. Sandra felt her eyes warm with emotion. She had not realized how visibly her fear had shown earlier. She had not realized how much Keanu's presence beside her had shaped the night. The director gently took her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. He told her she looked stronger than she believed. He said she had always carried a kindness that people remembered long after the noise faded. His words were soft, but they touched something deep inside her. But before Sandra could respond, the lights in the hall flickered for a moment. It was brief, barely a second, but enough to make people turn their heads. The soft music that filled the room paused for a heartbeat, then returned as if nothing had happened. Sandra looked upward instinctively, and Keanu noticed her reaction. The room returned to normal, but the flicker left a slight uneasiness in the air, a feeling that something unseen had shifted. The director smiled and said the building was old and sometimes the lights behaved strangely. He tried to lighten the moment. Sandra forced a small smile, but something about the flicker stayed in her mind. It was not fear, just a quiet awareness that the night was still unfolding in unexpected ways. Keanu gently encouraged her toward their seats, and they thanked the director before moving forward. As they sat down, Sandra took a slow breath. The seat's soft fabric helped her feel grounded again. Keanu settled beside her, his calm presence steady as always. The lights dimmed a little more as more guests entered the hall. Soft conversations filled the air. The energy felt warm again, but under it, Sandra sensed something else. Maybe it was just the tension from earlier still clinging to her mind. Maybe it was the mystery of the flickering lights. Maybe it was the strange envelope she received in the lounge. Whatever it was, it made her more aware of every small sound around them. Keanu noticed her deep breathing. He leaned closer and asked quietly if she was all right. She nodded and said she was trying to stay present. He told her she was doing better than she realized. She looked at him and saw the sincerity in his eyes. It gave her strength. She whispered that she did not know how she would have handled tonight without him. He simply said he was there because he wanted to be, not because he had to be. The words were calm but full of meaning. Before Sandra could continue speaking, the lights in the hall dimmed completely. People settled into their seats, thinking the movie was about to start. A soft hush fell over the room. Sandra leaned back, preparing for the familiar opening music. But instead of the movie screen lighting up, a single spotlight appeared at the front of the stage. People exchanged confused glances. Sandra and Keanu looked at each other, uncertain of what was happening. A staff member stepped onto the stage, holding a small card. He tapped the microphone gently to check the sound. His voice echoed as he spoke. He announced that before the film began, the event organizers wanted to present a short tribute to two individuals who had shown incredible grace and kindness throughout their careers. The room grew silent. The staff member continued speaking, his voice growing warmer with every word. He said the tribute was not planned to be public. It was meant to be delivered privately after the premiere. But due to a special request made only hours earlier, the organizers decided to share it with everyone. The lights shifted again as the screen behind the stage flickered to life. Sandra's heart skipped. She looked at Keanu, and he looked back with the same confusion. The first image that appeared was a photo of Sandra comforting a young fan many years ago, the same moment that had been mentioned in the mysterious note. Sandra placed her hand on her heart. The next image showed Keanu helping a film crew member who had fainted in the heat during a shoot. People in the audience began whispering softly, touched by the sincerity of the tribute. The tribute continued, showing moments of kindness from both their careers, small and large, moments they had forgotten but others had held close. As the images played, Sandra felt her eyes grow warm. She was not prepared for this. She had tried to enter the night quietly, hoping only for peace. Instead, the world was reflecting her kindness back at her in a way she never expected. Keanu looked at the screen with soft eyes, humbled by the unexpected recognition. The audience grew emotional. The room felt full of warmth, gratitude, and calm energy. But then the tribute reached the last slide. The image was simple. It showed a moment from earlier that night. Sandra stepping out of the car with a calm but fragile expression. Keanu offering his arm with steady grace. The caption at the bottom of the screen said only one line: "Real kindness never hides." The room fell completely silent. Sandra felt a deep shiver move through her, not from fear, not from sadness, but from something she could not name, something powerful, something true. She slowly turned her head toward Keanu. He was still watching the screen, his expression soft but unreadable. She wondered if he felt the same weight inside his chest. She wondered if he understood how much the night had changed. Just as the tribute ended, the lights in the hall flickered again. This time they flickered longer, and the suspense in the room deepened. The lights flickered again, longer than before, and a quiet wave of uneasiness moved through the hall. Some people looked up at the ceiling. Others whispered to each other, unsure if it was part of the tribute or a technical issue. The screen went dark for a moment before glowing back to life with a soft, golden light. Sandra held her breath as she waited for something to happen next. The air felt heavier, as if the entire room had paused in a single shared heartbeat. Keanu sat beside her with calm, steady eyes, but even he felt the shift around them. He leaned slightly closer and whispered that it might just be a projector problem. Sandra nodded, but something inside her felt different. Something about the flicker, the tribute, and the strange envelope earlier in the night seemed connected in ways she could not yet understand. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that they were safe and surrounded by people who had come to celebrate. Still, the feeling in her chest stayed warm and restless. The staff member on stage cleared his throat gently. He apologized for the brief interruption and explained that the technical team was checking the system. People settled again, though some still glanced around with a hint of curiosity and suspense. While the room adjusted, Sandra lowered her eyes, letting her thoughts drift through everything that had happened so far. The support from Keanu, the message from the fan, the unexpected tribute, and the weight of the night pressing on her heart. She wondered if life had a strange way of reminding someone of their own worth when they needed it most. As she sat quietly, Keanu gently placed his hand near hers on the armrest. He did not touch her hand directly, but the closeness was enough to make her feel grounded again. She looked at him with a grateful expression. He gave her a small smile, the kind that carried quiet understanding. He whispered that no matter what happened next, she was not alone. She nodded softly, letting the reassurance sink deep into her chest. Just then, a soft chime echoed through the hall. The lights dimmed even further. The screen faded from gold to deep blue before showing a message in gentle white letters. It said that the final part of the tribute was a short video recorded by someone who wanted to speak to both Keanu and Sandra. The hall grew silent again. People leaned forward. Even the air felt still, as if waiting for something meaningful to unfold. The screen brightened and a video began to play. It showed a small backstage interview room softly lit. A woman stepped into the frame. She appeared to be in her late 20s, nervous but smiling gently. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a folded paper. She looked directly into the camera with eyes full of emotion. Sandra felt her heart tighten. Something about the woman's face looked familiar, though she could not place where she had seen her before. The woman introduced herself in a quiet voice. She said she was the same fan who had written the note Sandra received earlier, the note about the moment when Sandra had comforted her as a child. The audience reacted with soft murmurs of surprise. Sandra's hand moved to her chest again. Her breath trembled slightly as she watched the woman on the screen. The woman continued speaking, her voice filled with gratitude and emotion. She said that the kindness Sandra showed her many years ago had changed the way she saw the world. She said she learned that gentle moments have the power to guide a person through darkness they do not know how to face alone. But then the woman paused. She looked down at the paper in her hands before lifting her eyes again. She said something unexpected. She said that the moment had changed her life even further because someone else had stepped into her world around the same time. Someone who had saved her from giving up during a difficult year. She said that this person was also sitting in this room tonight. Keanu froze. Sandra felt her heartbeat echo inside her ears. People in the hall leaned even closer. The woman continued. She said that years ago, when she was struggling through school and dealing with loneliness, she had watched an interview where Keanu encouraged young people to keep moving forward even when life felt impossible. She said his sincerity had given her strength she did not know she had. She said his words had stayed with her during nights when she wanted to quit. Her voice cracked as she said she believed she was still here tonight because both Keanu and Sandra had given her something she could not find anywhere else. Sandra felt her eyes fill with tears again. Keanu looked straight at the screen, deeply moved. He did not blink. He did not shift. Something about the woman's honesty touched something inside him he rarely let others see. The woman finally folded the paper in her hands and said she had made a request to the organizers. She wanted the tribute to be shown publicly because she believed the world needed to be reminded that kindness does not disappear. She said that people forget how many lives are changed by gentle words, soft actions, and the quiet courage to show respect. She hoped that by sharing her message tonight, she could give something back to the two people who unknowingly helped her find her way. The video ended slowly. The screen dimmed, the hall stayed silent. No one clapped, no one whispered. The silence was not empty, it was full of emotion, gratitude, and a quiet kind of healing. Sandra covered her mouth with her hand as tears slipped down her cheeks. She looked at Keanu, and what she saw in his eyes was something she had not seen before. Not just calmness, not just kindness, but a deep emotion that came from a place of humility and understanding. He reached for her hand gently, and this time he did hold it. She did not pull away. She let their hands rest together in the soft glow of the dim lights. Just as she was about to speak, the lights flickered once more. But this time, something else happened. A voice echoed through the speaker, calling Sandra's name softly. A voice she had not heard in many years. A voice that held a story she never expected to face tonight. The voice that echoed through the speakers was soft, almost unsure, but it carried a tone that made Sandra freeze instantly. Her hand tightened around Keanu's without her noticing. Her breath stopped as memories she kept hidden began to rise from somewhere deep inside her chest. She knew that voice. She knew it in a way she could never forget, no matter how many years had passed. Keanu turned to her, sensing her sudden stillness. He whispered her name, trying to steady her, but her eyes stayed fixed on the screen as the voice spoke again. The room grew impossibly quiet. The gentle blue glow from the screen lit the faces of everyone watching. No one moved. No one whispered. The suspense held the entire hall in a breath that refused to release. Then the screen brightened slowly. A man stepped into view. Older now, his hair touched with gray, his eyes soft with emotion. He looked directly into the camera as if searching for Sandra in the room. He cleared his throat gently, almost nervously. Sandra's fingers trembled in Keanu's hand. She felt her heart swell with a mixture of fear, surprise, and something bittersweet. It was her old acting coach, the man who had once taught her how to breathe on stage when her voice had nearly vanished from anxiety. The man who helped her find her confidence during the early days of her career, when she doubted herself more than anyone knew. She had lost contact with him years ago after he moved overseas, and life had pulled them into different directions. She never expected to hear his voice again, let alone tonight, in front of a full premiere audience. The coach smiled faintly, almost shyly, and said he hoped she could hear him clearly. Sandra blinked back, the tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. Her chest tightened as he began speaking. He said he had been following Sandra's journey from afar for years. He said he had always believed in her heart more than in her talent because her heart was the part that never failed to inspire people. He spoke of the day she arrived at his studio for the first time. Quiet, nervous, unsure. He said she had a kindness even then, a softness that made people trust her without effort. Sandra covered her mouth with her hand, her tears slipping freely now. She had not expected praise. She had not expected memories. She had not expected to feel seen in such a deep way on a night she thought would only bring pressure. The coach paused and looked down for a moment before lifting his eyes again. This time, his voice grew more emotional. He said he wanted to thank the person sitting beside her too. He said he had watched Keanu's journey with the same admiration, not because of fame or movies, but because of the consistency of his gentle spirit. He said very few people carry strength without pride and kindness without noise. He said Keanu was one of them. Keanu's expression softened in a way Sandra rarely saw. His eyes lowered slightly, humbled by the unexpected words. The audience remained silent but breathlessly attentive. Then the coach revealed something neither of them expected. He said he had been the one who helped arrange the tribute tonight. He said he felt the world needed to see kindness not as a small moment, but as a powerful story that shapes people in invisible ways. He believed their partnership, their quiet respect, and their years of unspoken support were something worth honoring. He said he hoped the night would remind them both of how much they mattered, not because of their fame, but because of their humanity. Sandra pressed her hand to her heart again. She felt overwhelmed, but in the most gentle way. She leaned slightly toward Keanu, and he placed his hand on her back, steady and warm. The coach's message continued. He said the premiere tonight was not just about a movie. He said it was a reminder that the light people bring to others returns to them in ways they do not expect. He believed this night was one of those moments. After that, he smiled one last time. He wished them peace, strength, and continued gentleness in a world that often forgets how important those things are. Then the screen faded to black slowly, leaving the audience in a thick cloud of emotion. No one clapped, no one moved. The silence was full of warmth, respect, and quiet awe. Sandra wiped her tears gently, her breath shaking as she tried to steady herself. Keanu squeezed her hand again, letting her know she was not alone in the moment. She looked at him with eyes full of gratitude. He met her gaze with the same steady calm that had guided her all night. They sat there for a long moment, both of them trying to absorb everything that had been said. The tribute, the fan's message, the unexpected voice of her old coach. All of it felt like pieces of a puzzle falling into place, reminding them of the impact kindness leaves behind long after the moment passes. Sandra whispered a soft thank you under her breath, not just for the tribute, not just for the recognition, but for Keanu's presence beside her through everything. Keanu nodded gently. He whispered that nights like this show what truly matters. He said kindness always finds its way back, even when someone forgets the moments that created it. She smiled through her tears. He smiled back. The air around them felt lighter. Then slowly, the lights in the hall rose again. The audience stood and began clapping. Not loud, not wild, but soft and heartfelt like a collective breath of gratitude. The applause wrapped around them, warm and sincere. Sandra stood slowly and Keanu rose beside her. The applause grew slightly stronger, filled with admiration rather than excitement. People looked at them with genuine warmth, not as stars, not as celebrities, but as two humans who had carried light into the world without realizing how far it reached. Sandra and Keanu shared one last quiet glance, both understanding without words that tonight had changed something inside them. Not their careers, not their fame, but their hearts. They walked out of the hall together, side by side, into the soft glow of the premiere lights waiting outside. The moment felt peaceful, almost magical. The noise of the city faded under the warmth of the atmosphere. People did not shout. They simply watched them with gentle smiles. The premiere had lit up that night. Not because of cameras, not because of fame, but because kindness shone brighter than anything else. And together, they stepped into the night carrying that light with them.